Sofia Rivera stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the bustling city of San Francisco spread out 30 floors below. The morning fog was lifting from the bay, revealing a world that seemed so much simpler from this height. If only her own life could be viewed with such clarity. The mahogany desk behind her held the latest financial reports for Rivera Luxury Hotels, an empire built by 3 generations of strong-willed women. As the heir apparent, Sofia had dedicated her entire adult life to expanding their influence across the West Coast. At 27, she had successfully opened 5 new properties and increased their revenue by 40%. Yet none of these achievements seemed to matter to the one person whose opinion shaped her. Destiny, her grandmother Alina, had called that morning with news that made Sofia's stomach turn. The weekly family dinner had been transformed into something far more significant. Alina had invited the Martinez family, specifically their eldest son, Diego, a man whose personality was as exciting as watching paint dry on a rainy day. Diego Martinez was everything her grandmother considered perfect husband material. He was wealthy, owning a chain of upscale restaurants throughout California. He came from a respectable family with old money and older values. He was also completely insufferable, treating every conversation like a business negotiation and every woman like a potential acquisition for his personal portfolio. The perfect solution. Sofia's phone buzzed with a text message, pulling her from her brooding thoughts. The name on the screen brought the first genuine smile to her face all morning. Jason Kane had been her closest friend since childhood, despite their families moving in different social circles. While the Riveras built their fortune in hospitality, Jason had carved his own path in the tech world. His software company, Cointech, had recently gone public, making him one of the youngest billionaires in Silicon Valley. Heard through the grapevine that Alina is plotting your romantic future. Again, need a rescue mission? His message read. Sofia laughed, despite her anxiety. Jason always seemed to know exactly when she needed him most. Their friendship had survived childhood pranks, teenage drama, college in different states, and the pressures of building their respective business empires. He was the one person who knew her not as Sofia Rivera, hotel heiress, but simply as Sophie. The girl who once convinced him to sneak out of boarding school to get midnight pizza. An idea began forming in her mind. It was crazy, potentially disastrous, and absolutely brilliant all at once. She grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator. Some conversations required looking someone in the eye, and this was definitely one of them. The Proposition Context's headquarters occupied an entire building in the heart of downtown, its modern glass facade reflecting the innovative spirit. Within, Sofia had visited many times over the years, watching Jason transform from a brilliant computer science student into a tech mogul who still wore sneakers to board meetings. His assistant, efficient young man named Trevor, recognized her immediately. Miss Rivera, Mr. Kane is in a meeting, but I can interrupt if it's urgent. It's urgent, Sofia confirmed, her heart pounding as she committed to this insane plan. Jason's office was a perfect blend of cutting-edge technology and comfortable living space. Multiple monitors displayed stock prices and project timelines, while a casual seating area with leather sofas provided a relaxed atmosphere for creative brainstorming. The man himself sat behind a sleek desk, his dark hair slightly messy from running his fingers through it, a habit he'd never outgrown. When he looked up and saw her expression, he immediately ended his video call. "What's wrong?" he asked, genuine concern filling his green eyes. "You look like you're about to either commit a crime or ask me to help you commit one." "Actually, it's more like asking you to help me commit fraud," Sofia said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "But the good kind of fraud, the kind that saves me from a lifetime of misery." Jason leaned back in his chair, an amused smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "This should be interesting. Lay it on me, Sophie." She took a deep breath and launched into her explanation. "Lena has decided that I need to be married, preferably to someone who can enhance the family's business interests. She's set her sights on Diego Martinez, and she's invited his entire family to dinner this weekend to essentially announce our engagement. Without asking you first, I assume. When has Alina ever asked permission for anything?" She sees an opportunity and she takes it. In her mind, I'm 27 and running out of time to secure a suitable husband. Jason nodded thoughtfully. And Diego is suitable? How exactly? He's wealthy, well-connected, and completely devoted to the idea that women should be beautiful. Accessories to successful men. Last time I had dinner with him, spent an hour explaining why I should consider hiring a male general manager for our hotels, because guests prefer dealing with men in positions of authority. Charming. So what's your plan? Fake your own death? Join a convent? Move to another country? Sophia stood up and began pacing, her nervous energy demanding movement. I need a boyfriend. Not a real boyfriend, obviously, because I don't have time for that complication. I need someone to present to Elena as my serious romantic interest. Someone impressive enough that she'll back off the Diego situation, and you want me to pretend to be this impressive boyfriend? The words hung in the air between them. Sophia stopped pacing and met his gaze directly. Yes, I know it's asking. A lot, and I know it could be weird, but you're the only person I trust with something this important. Jason was quiet for several moments, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. They had known each other for 15 years. But something in his expression was different now, more focused and serious than she had ever seen him. What would this fake relationship entail exactly? He asked finally. Just a few family events. Maybe some public appearances to make it believable. It's nothing too complicated or time-consuming. It's just enough to convince Elena that I'm happily involved with someone she can't control. Stev, and after she's convinced, do we have a dramatic breakup? Announce that we're better as friends? Sophia hadn't thought that far ahead. The immediate crisis had consumed all her mental energy. We'll figure that out later. Right now, I just need to survive this weekend without finding myself engaged to a man who thinks my career is a charming hobby. I'll abandon once I become his wife. Jason stood up and walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of her. At 6 feet tall, he had several inches on her even when she wore heels. His presence was commanding without being intimidating, confident without arrogance. She realized suddenly that he would make an extremely convincing boyfriend for someone. In her position, there's one problem with your plan, Sophie, he said softly. Her heart sank. You won't do it. I'll do it. The problem is that I've been wanting an excuse to hold your hand and kiss you in public for about 10 years now.
Ow.
This fake relationship might not stay fake on my end. The admission hit her like a physical force. She stared at him, processing. Words that rearranged everything she thought she understood about their friendship. Jason, ... I know. It's complicated. Could ruin everything between us. But I also can't stand the thought of you marrying someone who doesn't see how incredible you are. He reached out and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, the gesture both familiar and startlingly intimate. So yes, I'll be your fake boyfriend. But I'm warning you now that my feelings won't be fake, and I'm not going to pretend. They are. Sophia felt the world shift beneath her feet. She had come here looking for a simple solution to a complex problem, but Jason had just revealed that the problem was far more complex than she had realized. Her oldest friend, her safe harbor in every storm, had feelings for her that went beyond friendship. What do we do now? She whispered. Jason's smile was gentle but determined. Now we save you from Diego Martinez. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. As they stood there in his office, the late morning sun streaming through the windows, and the sounds of the city humming below them, Sophia realized that her carefully ordered world was about to become beautifully chaotic. She had asked Jason to pretend to love her, never suspecting that he wouldn't have to pretend at all. The game they were about to play had rules she didn't understand and stakes she couldn't predict. But looking into Jason's eyes, she knew she was ready to find out where this dangerous masquerade would lead them both. The next morning arrived with an urgency that made Sophia's coffee taste bitter. She had spent the entire night alternating between excitement and terror, replaying Jason's confession over and over in her mind. The revelation that her best friend harbored romantic feelings for her had shifted the foundation of everything she thought she knew about their relationship. Jason arrived at her penthouse apartment in Pacific Heights carrying 2 cups of coffee from their favorite cafe and wearing tresses, a navy suit that made his green eyes look almost emerald. The familiar gesture of bringing her morning coffee felt different now, weighted with new meaning and unspoken possibilities. Ready for your crash course in being madly in love? He asked, settling onto her cream-colored sofa with an ease born of years of friendship. Sophia curled up in the adjacent armchair, wrapping her silk robe more tightly around herself. I still can't believe we're actually doing this. What if Alina sees through it immediately? She's not exactly naive about human nature. Alina wants to see you happy and settled. If we're convincing enough, she'll see what she wants to see. Jason leaned forward, his expression growing serious. But we need to establish some ground rules. This has to be believable, which means we need to know intimate details about each other that couples would know. The word intimate sent a flutter through Sophia's stomach that she tried to ignore. What kind of details? Everything. How we supposedly met as a romantic couple when we realized we were in love, what we find irresistible about each other. Alina will ask questions, and inconsistent answers will expose us immediately. Sophia nodded, pulling out her phone to take notes. Okay, so our cover story. We've known each other for years as friends, but when did romance supposedly begin? Jason was quiet for a moment, staring out at the view of the Golden Gate Bridge framed by her living room windows. 3 months ago, he said finally. Charity auction for children's hospitals. You were wearing that emerald green dress that matched your eyes, and you laughed at something the auctioneer said. I realized I didn't want to spend another day pretending I only saw you as a friend. The specificity of his answer caught her off guard. What? You remember what I wore to that event? I remember everything about that night, Sophie, including how I spent the entire evening wanting to tell you how beautiful you looked and how I chickened out and talked about quarterly projections instead. Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. Jason, were you actually going to tell me how you felt that night? I've been working up the courage to tell you for months. This arrangement just gave me the perfect excuse. He set down his coffee and moved to sit on the edge of her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Which brings me to the most important ground rule. We need to practice being physically affectionate. Alina will expect to see genuine chemistry between us. Sophia's pulse quickened. What kind of physical affection? Hand-holding, casual touches, the way couples unconsciously gravitate toward each other in social situations. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with practiced ease, and kissing. Definitely kissing. The memory of their conversation, the day before, flooded back. Jason had warned her that his feelings wouldn't be fake. Now, sitting so close, she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. She was beginning to understand the dangerous territory they were entering. Maybe we should practice, she whispered, the words escaping before her rational mind could stop them. Jason's eyes darkened. Are you sure? Once we cross this line, Sophie, there's no going back to the way things were before. And instead of answering with words, she leaned forward and kissed him. The art of deception, the kiss was everything Sophia had never let herself imagine it could be. Jason's lips were warm and gentle at first, testing her response before deepening the connection with a passion that made her forget why they were doing this in the first place. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone as if he were memorizing the moment. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily. Sophia felt dizzy with want and confusion, her carefully controlled world spinning wildly off its axis. That was ... She began, but couldn't find words to finish the thought. Dangerous, Jason completed, his voice rough with barely contained desire. That was dangerous, and we're going to have to do it again in front of your entire family. The reminder of their ultimate goal brought reality crashing back. They weren't exploring romantic possibilities. They were rehearsing a performance designed to deceive her grandmother and escape an unwanted marriage. We should probably practice more, Sophia said, trying to sound practical rather than breathless, just to make sure we look convincing. Smile was knowing. Practice, right? Because that kiss looked very fake. Over the next few hours, they worked on perfecting their couple dynamic. Jason taught her the way he liked his coffee. She shared her secret fear of butterflies. And they created a shared history of romantic moments that felt surprisingly natural to construct. The real challenge came when Jason's sister, Victoria, arrived unexpectedly. Victoria Kane was 2 years younger than Jason. With the same striking green eyes and an MBA from Stanford, She worked as Kane-Tech's chief operating officer and had known Sophia almost as long as Jason had. If anyone would be able to detect their deception, it would be Victoria. "Sophie," Victoria exclaimed, embracing her warmly. "I haven't seen you in months. How are the hotels doing?" "Expanding faster than we can keep up with," Sophia replied, accepting a glass of wine that Jason had poured. "We're looking at properties in Seattle and Portland. It's fantastic. And Jason tells me you two are finally dating." Victoria settled onto the sofa with an expression that was part curiosity, part skepticism. "I have to admit, I'm surprised. It took you this long to figure it out." Sophia felt Jason tense beside her. "What do you mean?" "Oh, please. Jason's been in love with you since college. I've been waiting for years for one of you to make a move." Victoria sipped her wine, studying their faces carefully. "Though I have to say, the timing seems awfully convenient given your grandmother's latest matchmaking attempts." The observation was delivered with a casual tone that didn't fool anyone. Victoria knew something was off, and she was testing their responses. Jason slipped his arm around Sophia's shoulders, pulling her closer against his side. "The timing isn't convenient, Vic. It's just finally right. Sometimes it takes a crisis to make you realize what's been in front of you all along." "And what crisis would that be?" Victoria asked innocently. "The crisis of potentially losing Sophie to some corporate automaton who sees her as a trophy rather than a partner," Jason replied, his voice carrying just enough edge to sound genuinely protective. Sophia found herself melting into his embrace, struck by how natural it felt to be held by him. "Your brother has excellent timing," she added, looking up at Jason with what she hoped looked like adoration. "Just when I thought I might have to resign myself to a loveless marriage, he reminded me what real partnership looks like." Victoria's expression softened. "When you put it like that, how could I object? You two do look happy together." The rest of Victoria's visit passed in a blur of shared stories and gentle interrogation. By the time she left, Sophia felt emotionally drained from maintaining their performance. The constant awareness of Jason's proximity, the casual intimacy of his touches, and the intensity of his gaze when he thought no one else was looking had created a persistent flutter of excitement in her chest. The family dinner, Lena Rivera's mansion in Nob Hill, was a testament to 3 generations of hospitality industry success. The dining room could accommodate 20 guests comfortably, and tonight it was set for exactly that number. Crystal glasses caught the light from the antique chandelier. Fresh orchids created elegant centerpieces on the mahogany table. Sophia stood in front of her childhood bedroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of her navy blue dress for the 5th time. The sophisticated cut flattered her figure while remaining appropriately modest for a family dinner. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was preparing for battle rather than a meal. Jason appeared in the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal gray suit. "You look incredible," he said, and the admiration in his voice didn't sound the least bit fake. "I feel like I'm about to face a firing squad." "Hey," crossed the room and took her hands in his, the gesture now familiar after hours of practice. "We've got this. Just remember our story, follow my lead, and try to look like you're madly in love with me."
Oh.
"That might not be as difficult as I thought," Sophia admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Something shifted in Jason's expression. Sophie ... A sharp knock interrupted whatever he had been about to say. "Sophia, darling, bring your young man downstairs. Everyone is eager to meet him." Elena's voice carried through the door with unmistakable authority. "Showtime," Jason murmured, offering her his arm with a gallant smile. The living room was filled with the buzz of conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. Sophia recognized most of the faces: family friends, business associates, and social acquaintances who formed the core of Elena's inner circle. And there, standing near the fireplace with a proprietary air that made her skin crawl, was Diego Martinez. Diego was handsome in a conventional way, with perfectly styled dark hair and expensive clothes that screamed old money. He was also currently staring at Jason with an expression that could only be described as territorial challenge. "Everyone," Elena announced, her voice cutting through the chatter, "like you to meet Jason Kane, Sophia's boyfriend." The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward them. Sophia felt Jason's hand tighten reassuringly on hers as they became the center of attention. "It's wonderful to finally meet you all," Jason said, his voice warm and confident. Sophie talks about her family constantly. "I feel like I know each of you already." Alina approached them with the regal bearing of a woman accustomed to command. At 75, she remained striking, with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "So you're the young man who has captured my granddaughter's heart," she said, studying Jason with unconcealed interest. "I must say, you're not quite what I expected." "I hope that's a good thing," Jason replied with just the right amount of humor. "It remains to be seen. Tell me, Mr. Kane, what are your intentions regarding Sophia?" The blunt question would have flustered most people, but Jason seemed completely at ease. "My intention, Mrs. Rivera, is to love and support her in all her endeavors. Sophia is building something remarkable with your hotel empire, and I consider myself lucky to be part of her journey." Lena's eyebrows rose slightly. "And your own business interests will always be secondary to ensuring Sophie's happiness and success." It was exactly the right answer, delivered with perfect sincerity. Sophia felt a surge of gratitude and something deeper watching Jason navigate her grandmother's interrogation with such skill. "Interesting," Alina murmured. "We'll see how the evening progresses." As Alina moved away to greet other guests, Diego approached them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sophia, you look lovely as always," he said, pointedly ignoring Jason's presence. "I was hoping we might have a chance to continue our conversation from last week." "Actually, Diego, I don't think we have anything to discuss," Sophia replied, stepping closer to Jason's side. "I believe I made my feelings quite clear. Because I got the impression that you were simply being modest about your interest." Diego's tone carried the assumption that rejection was impossible rather than probable. Jason's arm tightened around Sophia's waist, and when he spoke, his voice carried a subtle warning. "I think what Sophie is trying to say is that she's not available for conversation about personal matters with other men. I'm sure you understand." The two men stared at each other for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Diego stepped back with a laugh that sounded forced. "Of course. Congratulations on your ... relationship." He walked away, but not before shooting Jason a look that promised this wasn't over. "That went well," Jason muttered, his hand rubbing soothing circles on Sophia's back. "He's not going to give up easily," Sophia warned. "Diego doesn't handle rejection well. Then it's a good thing you have me to help handle him." The dinner itself was a masterclass in social warfare. Alina had strategically seated Jason between herself and Sophia, ensuring maximum opportunity for interrogation.
Ow.
Diego sat directly across from them, making pointed comments about business partnerships and the importance of maintaining family traditions throughout the meal. Jason played his part perfectly. He was attentive without being possessive, confident without being arrogant. He asked intelligent questions about the hotel business, shared stories about his own company's growth, and most importantly, he treated Sophia like a partner rather than an accessory. When Alina asked about their future plans, Jason reached over and took Sophia's hand. "We're taking things one day at a time, building a relationship on a foundation of friendship and mutual respect." "And marriage?" Alina pressed. "Surely you've discussed marriage." Sophia felt her cheeks flush, but Jason answered smoothly. "When the time is right, I hope Sophie will consider spending her life with me. But that's her decision to make, and I'll respect whatever timeline she's comfortable with." Alina actually smiled at that answer, refreshing. Most young men seem to think they can make decisions for the women in their lives. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sophia felt cautiously optimistic that their performance had been successful. Alina had warmed to Jason considerably, and even the other family members seemed impressed by his obvious devotion to Sophia's happiness and success. But as they said their goodbyes, Alina pulled Sophia aside for a private moment. "He's quite charming," she said, studying her granddaughter's face carefully, "and clearly smitten with you." "Yes, he is," Sophia agreed, surprised by how icily the words came. "Just remember, darling, that the heart wants what it wants, regardless of our careful plans. Sometimes the most dangerous deceptions are the ones we practice on ourselves." Elena kissed her cheek and walked away, leaving Sophia with the unsettling feeling that her grandmother had seen through more than she intended to reveal. Later, as Jason drove her home through the quiet San Francisco streets, they maintained the comfortable silence of a successful mission completed. But Sophia couldn't shake Elena's words, with a growing realization that the most convincing part of their performance tonight had been how natural it felt to be Jason's girlfriend. The question was, how much of their chemistry had been acting, and how much had been the truth they'd been hiding from themselves for years. Sophia woke up in her penthouse apartment, with sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the memory of Jason's goodnight kiss still tingling on her lips. It had been meant as a final performance piece for Elena's benefit, delivered on her doorstep where her grandmother's driver could witness it. But the way Jason had held her face in his hands, the tenderness in his eyes, and the reluctance with which they had separated suggested something far more genuine than mere acting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Breakfast? We need to debrief last night's performance." The word performance stung more than it should have. After 3 days of practiced intimacy and carefully orchestrated romance, Sophia was having difficulty distinguishing between what was real and what was manufactured for Elena's consumption. The boundaries of their friendship had been so thoroughly crossed that she wasn't sure they still existed an hour later. Jason arrived with pastries from their favorite bakery and an expression that mirrored her own confusion. He looked like a man who had spent the night wrestling with complicated emotions rather than celebrating a successful deception. "So," he said, settling onto her kitchen island with studied casualness, "I think we fooled everyone last night." "Everyone except Elena," Sophia replied, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "She cornered me before we left and made some comment about the heart wanting what it wants regardless of our careful plans." Jason's hand paused halfway to his mouth. "She knows. I think she suspects something. The question is whether she suspects we're faking the relationship or that we're not faking it as much as we pretend to be." The admission hung in the air between them like a challenge. They had spent days avoiding the obvious truth that their practiced romance felt more natural than either of them had expected. The chemistry they had discovered wasn't something that could be turned off when the audience disappeared. "Sophie," Jason began, was interrupted by the sharp ring of her phone. Elena's name appeared on the screen, and Sophia felt her stomach drop. Her grandmother never called before noon, unless something significant had happened. "Darling Elena's voice was crisped with purpose. "I need you and Jason to attend the Children's Hospital Benefit Gala tomorrow night. The Hendersons are hosting, and it's important that we show family unity." "Tomorrow night, Elena? That's very short notice." "Nonsense. Young people don't need weeks to prepare for social obligations. Besides, I've already accepted on your behalf and informed the committee that Jason will be making a generous donation." On behalf of Cantech, Sophia looked at Jason, who had clearly heard every word of the conversation. He nodded his agreement, but his expression was troubled. "Of course, Elena, we'll be there. Excellent. And Sophia, we're something spectacular. The photographers will be present, and I want everyone to see how radiant you look with your young man." The call ended, leaving Sophia with the sinking realization that their deception was expanding beyond family dinners into the public eye. Photographers meant newspaper coverage, which meant their fake relationship would become a matter of public record. "Are you having second thoughts?" Jason asked quietly. Sophia studied his face, noting the tension around his eyes and the way his jaw was set with determination. "Are you, every minute of every day since we started this? But not for the reasons you might think?" Before she could ask what he meant, Jason's phone rang. The caller ID showed Victoria's name, and he answered with obvious reluctance. "Jason." Thank God, Victoria's voice carried an edge of panic. "Have you seen the morning business section?" "No. Why?" "There's an article about Cantech's projected quarterly earnings, and it mentions your relationship with Sofia Rivera. The reporter is speculating about a potential merger between your companies through marriage." Jason and Sophia stared at each other in horror. Their private arrangement had somehow become public speculation about corporate strategy. "Send me the link," Jason said grimly. Public scrutiny, the article was worse than Sophia had imagined. business reporter had crafted a narrative about strategic romance, suggesting that Jason and Sophia's relationship was a calculated move to combine their business empires. The piece included quotes from anonymous sources speculating about wedding dates and corporate restructuring plans. "This is a disaster," Sophia said, pacing the length of her living room. "If Elena sees this article, she'll know immediately that something isn't right. She raised me to never mix business with personal relationships. More importantly, if Diego sees this, he'll use it as ammunition. He can position himself as the authentic romantic choice versus the calculated business partnership." As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia's phone rang again. This time, the caller was Diego Martinez. "Sophia, darling," his voice oozed false sympathy, "I just saw the most interesting article in the business section. I had no idea your relationship with Mr. Kane was so strategically advantageous." "Diego, I don't know what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything. I'm simply observing that true love rarely makes the business pages as a merger opportunity." His tone sharpened. "Elena deserves to know if you're being manipulated for corporate gain." The threat was clear. Diego was positioning himself as Sophia's protector against Jason's supposed business machinations. "My relationship with Jason is none of your concern," Sophia replied, but she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. "Isn't it? I care about you, Sophia, even if you're too blinded by promises of expanded market share to see what's really happening." The call ended, leaving Sophia shaking with anger and fear. Diego's accusation struck uncomfortably close to the truth, even though his interpretation was wrong. She and Jason were deceiving Elena, just not in the way Diego suspected. "He's going to tell Elena about the article," she said to Jason, who had been listening to the conversation with growing concern. "Then we need to tell her first. We control the narrative if we get to her before Diego does." The truth about deception. Elena agreed to meet them for lunch at her private club, a prestigious establishment where 3 generations of Rivera women had conducted important family business. The dining room was nearly empty at midday, providing the privacy they needed for what Sophia suspected would be one of the most difficult conversations of her life. Elena arrived wearing a charcoal gray suit that emphasized her silver hair and commanding presence. She kissed both Sophia and Jason on the cheek before settling into her chair, with the regal bearing of a woman accustomed to difficult negotiations. "I assume this emergency meeting is about the unfortunate article in this morning's paper," she said without preamble. "Or perhaps about Diego Martinez's phone call expressing concern for your welfare." Sophia and Jason exchanged glances. Elena was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Elena," Sophia began, "I need to tell you something about my relationship with Jason, that it's a carefully constructed deception designed to prevent me from arranging your marriage to Diego." Elena's voice was calm, almost amused. "Yes, darling. I figured that out during the first course last night." The admission hit Sophia like a physical blow. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. I've been managing family dynamics and business relationships for 50 years. Do you really think I couldn't recognize a performance when I saw one?" Elena sipped her water with elegant composure. "The question is why you thought such elaborate deception was necessary." Jason leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Mrs. Rivera, I want you to know that my feelings for Sophia are completely genuine. The arrangement was her idea, but my emotions are real. I don't doubt that, young man. What I doubt is whether my granddaughter has allowed herself to acknowledge her own feelings." Elena turned her penetrating gaze to Sophia. "You've spent so much energy trying to avoid Diego's unwanted attention that you failed to recognize the gift sitting right in front of you." "Elena, you what? You thought you could manipulate me into accepting a relationship you were too afraid to pursue honestly. You thought I couldn't tell the difference between a business arrangement and genuine love?" Sophia felt tears threatening, overwhelmed by shame and confusion. "I didn't know what else to do. You were so determined to see me married, and Diego was so persistent, and I just needed time to think." Elena's expression softened. "Darling, I've never wanted you to marry someone you don't love. I wanted you to stop using your career as an excuse to avoid emotional intimacy. There's a difference. But Diego is a pompous fool who sees you as a trophy. I invited him to dinner to remind you that there are worse fates than loving someone who truly sees your worth." The revelation reframed everything Sophia thought she understood about her grandmother's motivations. Alina hadn't been trying to force an unwanted marriage. She had been trying to force an examination of what Sophia actually wanted from life. And what I want, Alina continued, is to see you happy with someone who loves you for who you are. Not what you represent. Someone like Mr. Kane, who has spent the last 3 days looking at you like you hung the moon. Jason's cheeks flushed, but he didn't deny the observation. "So what happens now?" Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alina smiled, the expression transforming her austere features into something warm and knowing. "Now you stop pretending and start being honest with yourselves and each other. Life is too short for elaborate deceptions when the truth is so much more beautiful." Beyond pretense that evening, Sophia stood on her apartment balcony, watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. The events of the day had left her emotionally exhausted and confused. About everything she thought she knew about her life and relationships, Jason joined her on the balcony, carrying 2 glasses of wine and wearing an expression of careful neutrality. "So," he said, settling beside her against the railing, "your grandmother is terrifying and brilliant. She always has been. I should have known she would see through our charade immediately."
Oh.
They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the growing darkness. The familiar view looked different somehow, as if Elena's revelations had shifted Sophia's perspective on everything she had taken for granted. "Jason," she said finally, "what Alina said about your feelings being genuine, every word was true. I've been in love with you for years, Sophie, and the fake relationship just gave me an excuse to show it." Sophia turned to face him, studying the familiar features that had become dear to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "And what she said about me using my career to avoid emotional intimacy? Also probably true. You've built walls around your heart that are higher than the buildings you manage." "I'm scared," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I'm scared that if I let myself love you the way I think I already do, everything will change, and I'll lose the best friendship I've ever had." Jason set down his wine glass and took her hands in his, the gesture now familiar, but weighted with new significance. "Sophie, everything has already changed. Can't go back to being just friends after what we've discovered about each other these past few days. And if we try to be more than friends and it doesn't work, then we'll deal with that if it happens. But if we don't try, we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering what we might have had." Sophia looked into his eyes and saw her own hopes and fears reflected back at her. The man who had been her anchor through every storm of her adult life was offering her something infinitely more precious than friendship. "The benefit gala tomorrow night," she said softly. "If we go together, it won't be fake anymore. No, it won't be fake. It will be real and scary, and probably the best decision we've ever made." Sophia stepped closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth of his body against hers. "Jason Kane, are you asking me to be your real girlfriend?" His smile was radiant with joy and relief. "Sophia Rivera, I'm asking you to be my real everything." When he kissed her this time, there was no audience to perform for and no deception to maintain. There was only the truth they had been hiding from themselves and the promise of a love that had grown from the strongest foundation possible, years of friendship, respect, and genuine affection. Epilogue. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Rivera flagship hotel was decorated with thousands of white roses and flickering candles, creating an atmosphere of elegant romance. Lena Rivera stood at the entrance greeting guests with the satisfaction of a woman whose careful orchestrations had yielded perfect results. Grandmother Sophia approached, wearing a flowing champagne-colored gown that made her skin glow. "Thank you for agreeing to host our engagement party here. Nonsense, darling. Where else would we celebrate the engagement of my granddaughter? To the man who was smart enough to love her exactly as she is?" Jason appeared at Sophia's side, resplendent in a midnight blue tuxedo and wearing the expression of a man who couldn't quite believe his good fortune. "Mrs. Rivera, thank you for everything, especially for seeing through our terrible acting." Lena laughed, a sound of pure delight. "My dear boy, your acting wasn't terrible. It was just unnecessary. The love was always real. You simply needed permission to acknowledge it." As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself marveling at how perfectly her life had rearranged itself once she stopped trying to control every variable. The hotel business continued to thrive under her leadership, but now she had someone who celebrated her successes without feeling threatened by them. Jason had proven to be not just a loving partner, but a brilliant business strategist who helped her see opportunities she might have missed. Even Diego Martinez had eventually conceded defeat gracefully, though not before making one final attempt to convince Elena that Sofia was making a mistake. Elena's response, according to witnesses, had been both swift and devastating in its politeness. "You know," Jason said, spinning Sofia around the dance floor to the sound of a live orchestra, "I owe Diego a thank you note for what? For being so thoroughly unacceptable that you were willing to fake date me instead of actually dating him. Otherwise, we might have spent another 10 years being just friends." Sofia laughed, the sound bright with happiness. "I think Elena deserves more credit than Diego. She orchestrated this entire situation to force us to confront our feelings. Remind me to never underestimate your grandmother again. It's too late for that. She's already planning our wedding." Jason's eyes widened in mock terror. "Should I be afraid?" Terrified, Sofia confirmed, then rose on her toes to kiss him. "Elena doesn't plan anything that isn't absolutely perfect." As they swayed together in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by family and friends celebrating their engagement, Sofia reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started with a desperate deception designed to avoid an unwanted marriage, and discovered instead the kind of love that transformed everything it touched. Sometimes, it's realized the best way to find the truth is to stop running from it. And sometimes the most elaborate lies simply reveal the feelings we've been to. Afraid to acknowledge, Jason twirled her one final time as the song ended. And when she came back into his arms, Sofia saw their future spread out before them like a promise. Hotels and technology companies, family dinners and stolen moments. The careful balance of two successful people building something beautiful together. "Ready for the rest of our lives, Mrs. Almost Kane," Jason whispered against her ear. "With you, I'm ready for everything." The orchestra struck up another song. They danced on into their perfectly imperfect, completely authentic, absolutely real, happily ever after.